A quiet Tuesday morning at Oakwood Elementary, drug dealers thought they owned the neighborhood, intimidating teachers and terrifying children with their threats. They believed no one would dare challenge them. 3 weeks later, 110 angels had set up permanent protection around the school. And those same dealers were nowhere to be found. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning bell at Oakwood Elementary School echoed through the crisp Colorado air, calling 340 students to another day of learning in Millfield. A town where everyone knew everyone, and children still walked to school without fear. Principal Rebecca Hayes stood at her office window, watching the familiar parade of yellow buses and parent drop-offs, her coffee steaming in the autumn chill. This was her sanctuary, her life's work, a place where 8-year-old Sophia giggled with friends over picture books, where 9-year-old Lucas proudly displayed his science project, where learning happened in safety. Rebecca had dedicated 15 years to Oakwood Elementary, watching hundreds of children grow from nervous kindergartners into confident fifth graders ready for middle school. The red brick building with its cheerful blue doors had been her second home, her mission, her calling. She knew every creak in the hallways, every parent's name, every child's dream. Mr. Anthony Reeves unlocked his third-grade classroom, arranging colorful learning stations for another day of discovery. Anthony had been teaching for 12 years, and his passion for education burned as bright as ever. His students adored him. He was the teacher who made math fun with games, who read voices for every character during story time, who noticed when someone was having a bad day and knew just how to make them smile. Walter Walt Briggs pushed his maintenance cart down the hallway, humming an old country tune. At 62, Walt had been the school's custodian for 8 years, but his role extended far beyond cleaning. He was the gentle giant who tied shoelaces, retrieved lost balls from the roof, and somehow always had a Band-Aid ready when someone scraped their knee. The children called him Mr. Walt, and he treasured every high five, every crayon drawing they pressed into his weathered hands. These three formed the backbone of Oakwood Elementary's daily rhythm, supported by a dedicated staff of teachers, aides, and volunteers who created an atmosphere where children thrived. The school sat on Maple Street, surrounded by modest family homes with swing sets in backyards and bicycles on front porches. This was small-town America at its finest, a place where neighbors looked out for each other, where children played freely, where innocence was protected. But even in paradise, shadows can creep in from unexpected places. 3 blocks away, in a run-down apartment complex that the city council had been promising to renovate for years, a different kind of community was taking root. The Riverside Apartments had become a haven for those who preyed on weakness, who saw opportunity in other people's misery, who mistook kindness for vulnerability. Dante Reza Morales surveyed his growing territory from his second-floor balcony, cigarette dangling from his lips as he planned his next expansion. At 28, Dante had built a reputation for ruthless efficiency in the drug trade, moving product through 3 counties with a network of dealers who feared his temper more than they feared jail time. His nickname came not from any weapon, but from his sharp tongue and sharper business practices. He could cut someone down with words as effectively as any blade. Kevin Blake and Shane Torres flanked him like loyal hounds, eager to prove their worth to a man they both feared and admired. Kevin, 25, was all muscle and no patience, the kind of enforcer who solved problems with his fists first and asked questions later. Shane, 23, was the opposite, quiet, calculating, with cold eyes that missed nothing and a smile that never reached them. Together, they had been systematically expanding their influence through Millfield, targeting the vulnerable, exploiting the desperate, and intimidating anyone who might consider standing in their way. They sold poison disguised as escape, destruction wrapped in temporary relief, futures stolen one hit at a time. The morning sun cast long shadows across the school playground as children laughed and ran, their voices carrying on the wind like music. Rebecca Hayes locked her car and walked toward the building, her mind already on the day's challenges. The parent conference at lunch, the budget meeting after school, the new reading program she wanted to implement. She couldn't have known that 3 blocks away, Dante Morales was studying a map of the neighborhood, his finger tracing the streets around Oakwood Elementary, his mind calculating distances and opportunities. She couldn't have imagined that her school, her safe haven, was about to become the center of a battle between good and evil that would change everything. The children played on, innocent and unaware, while the adults who loved them prepared for another ordinary day. But sometimes ordinary days end with extraordinary challenges, and heroes are born not from choice, but from necessity. The first sign of trouble came on a Wednesday morning that started like any other. Patricia Daniels was dropping off her 7-year-old daughter Sophia when she noticed 3 men loitering near the school fence, their eyes scanning the playground with predatory interest. Something about their presence felt wrong. They didn't belong in this world of backpacks and lunchboxes, of worried mothers and hurried fathers. Dante Morales had been watching Oakwood Elementary for 2 weeks, studying patterns, identifying weaknesses, calculating opportunities. The school represented everything he despised about suburban comfort, the assumption that safety was guaranteed, that evil would always stay on the other side of town. He saw their innocence as ignorance, their trust as stupidity. Perfect hunting ground, he muttered to Kevin Blake, nodding toward the playground where children ran freely, their laughter echoing off the brick walls. Parents with money, kids with no street smarts. We set up shop here, expand our customer base to the high school, and own this whole district within 6 months. Kevin cracked his knuckles, already imagining the intimidation tactics they'd need. What about the teachers? Principal? Dante's smile was cold as winter. They'll learn to mind their own business, or they'll learn the hard way. Shane Torres remained silent, but his calculating gaze was already mapping escape routes and weak points. He was the strategist of the group, the one who thought 3 moves ahead, while others were still planning their first. The school's location was ideal. Multiple exits, busy streets for quick getaways, and a community that would rather call meetings than confront problems directly. That afternoon, Principal Hayes noticed them too. The 3 men had moved closer to the main entrance, their presence creating an invisible cloud of tension that even the children seemed to sense. She watched from her office window as parents hurried past them with downcast eyes. As teachers glanced nervously over their shoulders, Rebecca had dealt with difficult situations before: budget cuts, angry parents, even a gas leak that required evacuation. But this felt different. These men weren't looking for their children or seeking information about enrollment. They were predators sizing up prey, and every instinct told her to act. She stepped outside, her heels clicking against the concrete with authority she didn't entirely feel. "Gentlemen, can I help you with something?" Dante turned slowly, his smile never wavering but his eyes growing colder. "Just admiring your school, Principal Hayes. Beautiful place. Safe neighborhood. Would hate to see anything change that." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Rebecca felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her voice steady. "Visiting hours are posted on our website. Right now, you're on school property without authorization." Kevin stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "We're on a public sidewalk, lady. Last I checked, that's not against the law." "The sidewalk ends 10 feet behind you," Rebecca replied, standing her ground. "You're currently trespassing." The confrontation might have escalated, but Mr. Walt Briggs emerged from the building, pushing his maintenance cart with deliberate casualness. At 6'2" and built like an old oak tree, Walt's presence changed the dynamic. He'd been watching from inside, and his protective instincts for the children and staff had overridden any concern for his own safety. "Everything all right out here, Principal Hayes?" Walt's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd dealt with trouble before. Dante assessed the situation quickly. 2 against 3 might work in their favor, but public confrontation wasn't his style. Better to retreat, regroup and return when the odds were more favorable. No problem at all. Just leaving. As they walked away, Dante called over his shoulder, "See you around, Principal Hayes. We'll be in the neighborhood." The threat lingered in the air like smoke after fire. Rebecca and Walt watched until the men disappeared around the corner, both knowing this wasn't over. "You want me to call the police?" Walt asked, his weathered hands gripping the cart handle. "And tell them what? 3 men were standing near our school?" Rebecca shook her head. "They didn't technically do anything illegal. But Walt, keep your eyes open. Something about this doesn't feel right." That evening, Rebecca found herself staying late, checking locks twice, updating security protocols she hoped she'd never need. The school felt different now, vulnerable in ways it had never been before. She called the district office, filed an incident report, and requested additional security measures, knowing the bureaucratic wheels would turn slowly while danger circled like wolves around a campfire. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, Dante was planning his next move. The initial probe had gone exactly as expected. Resistance from authority figures, but no real teeth behind their bark. The custodian might be a problem, but old men were easier to intimidate than they thought. The principal showed backbone, but backbone could be broken. Tomorrow. "We get closer," he told Kevin and Shane. "Time to show them what happens when people don't cooperate with business." Expansion. The war for Oakwood Elementary had begun, though only one side knew it yet. Thursday morning brought grey clouds and a tension that seemed to seep through the school's brick walls. The drug dealers returned, but this time they weren't content to observe from a distance. Dante Morales had spent the night planning, and his strategy was simple: establish dominance through fear, then expand operations once resistance crumbled. They positioned themselves at different points around the school. Dante near the main entrance, Kevin by the playground, Shane watching the staff parking lot. The message was clear: we're everywhere, we see everything, and we're not going away. Patricia Daniels felt her stomach clench as she walked Sophia to the school entrance. The same 3 men were back, their presence like a dark stain on the morning's innocence. She quickened her pace, pulling her daughter closer, but Dante stepped directly into their path. "Morning, beautiful day," he said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Cute kid. Sophia, right? 3rd grade?" Patricia's blood turned to ice. He knew her daughter's name. "Excuse me," she managed, trying to move around him. "Just being friendly," Dante continued, but he didn't step aside. "Millfield's a small town. We all need to look out for each other's children, don't we?" The threat was crystal clear. Patricia hurried Sophia inside, her hands shaking as she signed the visitor log. She immediately sought out Principal Hayes, finding her in the main office, reviewing security footage from the previous day. "They know my daughter's name," Patricia whispered, her voice tight with fear. "How do they know her name?" Rebecca's jaw clenched as she watched the morning encounter on the security monitor. The men were getting bolder, more direct. This was no longer about intimidating staff. They were targeting families, children, the very heart of what the school protected. Mr. Anthony Reeves was setting up his classroom when he noticed Kevin Blake peering through his ground floor window, hands cupped against the glass to block the glare. The sight of this stranger watching his students' empty desks filled Anthony with a rage he'd never experienced in 12 years of teaching. He marched outside, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by protective fury. "Get away from my classroom, now!" Kevin turned slowly, amused by the teacher's attempt at authority. "Public street, teach. I can look wherever I want." "Not at my students, you can't." Anthony pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," Kevin laughed. "Tell them what? That someone looked through a window?" "Good luck with that." But Anthony was already dialing, documenting everything. The police arrived 20 minutes later, took statements, and promised increased patrols. Officer Rodriguez was sympathetic but honest. Until the men actually committed a crime, there was little law enforcement could do. By noon, the dealers had escalated further. Shane Torres approached Walt Briggs as he collected trash from the outdoor bins, his quiet voice carrying more menace than any shout. "Nice school you got here, old man. Lot of kids, lot of responsibility." Must keep you up at night, worrying about their safety. Walt straightened to his full height, his weathered hands still gripping the trash bag. At 62, he'd survived 2 tours in Vietnam and 30 years of factory work before finding peace at Oakwood Elementary. He'd seen real danger, real evil, and he wasn't about to back down from 3 street punks. "I sleep just fine," Walt said quietly. "But you might want to start worrying about your own safety." Shane's cold smile widened. "Is that a threat, janitor?" "It's a promise. You mess with these kids, you mess with me." The confrontation ended when Principal Hayes emerged from the building. But Shane's parting words chilled everyone who heard them. "Accidents happen around schools, old man. Kids get hurt. Teachers too. Shame when good people suffer for other people's mistakes." That afternoon brought the breaking point. As children lined up for dismissal, Dante approached little Lucas Martinez, who was waiting for his mother near the flagpole. The 9-year-old looked up at the strange man with curious eyes, unaware of the danger towering over him. "Hey there, sport. Your mom's running late. Want me to give you a ride home?" Mr. Reeves spotted the interaction from across the courtyard and sprinted over, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Lucas, come here. Right now." Dante's hand was already reaching toward the boy when Anthony arrived, positioning himself between the dealer and his student. "Back off, now. Just trying to help," Dante said, but his eyes held malicious amusement. Kid looked lost. "He's not lost. He's exactly where he belongs." Anthony's voice carried steel he didn't know he possessed. "And you need to leave." Other parents had noticed the commotion. Gathering in a protective circle around Lucas, Dante found himself surrounded by mothers and fathers whose parental instincts had transformed them from suburban comfort into a pack of wolves. Defending their young for the first time, he felt outnumbered. But rather than retreat, he laughed. "This is cute, real cute, but you people have no idea what you're dealing with. This is my neighborhood now, my territory. And if you don't want your precious little angels getting hurt, you'll learn to show proper respect." Mrs. Gloria Vega, a grandmother who'd been picking up her grandson, stepped forward with fire in her eyes. "We know exactly what we're dealing with. Cowards who threaten children because they're too weak to face adults." The crowd murmured agreement, but Dante's smile only grew wider. "Brave words, Abuela. Let's see how brave you are when your grandson walks home alone tomorrow." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Parents pulled their children closer, teachers formed protective barriers, and everyone realized the same terrifying truth. This was no longer about intimidation. These men were declaring war on innocence itself, and the battleground was the place children should feel safest. As the dealers finally left, Principal Hayes made a decision that would change everything. Some battles couldn't be fought through proper channels, bureaucratic procedures, or polite requests for help. Sometimes, when evil threatened the innocent, good people had to find warriors willing to stand in the gap. She had no idea that her desperate search for help was about to bring 110 of the most unlikely protectors Colorado had ever seen. That evening, Principal Hayes sat in her kitchen, staring at her laptop screen with trembling fingers. She'd exhausted every official channel: police, district office, city council, even the mayor's office. Each conversation ended the same way: sympathy, concern, promises of increased patrols, and the crushing reality that nothing would happen until after someone got hurt. The system wasn't designed to stop predators before they struck. It was designed to punish them afterward, and that was a luxury she couldn't afford when children's lives hung in the balance. Rebecca's sister lived in Denver, and over the years she'd shared stories about her neighbor, a man named Commander Mike Thunder Castellano, who led something called the Rocky Mountain Angels. Initially, Rebecca had dismissed these stories as urban legends: motorcycle clubs helping communities, protecting the innocent, standing up to bullies. It sounded too good to be true, but desperate times called for desperate measures. She found the Rocky Mountain Angels website at 11:47 p.m., her coffee growing cold as she read testimonials from communities they'd helped. A small town in Wyoming where they'd stopped a meth lab from operating near a daycare. a neighborhood in Utah where they'd convinced gang members to move their drug operations away from family homes. A high school in Nevada where their presence alone had ended months of violence and intimidation. Each story followed the same pattern. Ordinary people facing extraordinary threats. Law enforcement unable or unwilling to act, and then the angels arriving like an answer to prayer. They didn't break laws or seek violence, but their presence carried a weight that made criminals reconsider their life choices. Rebecca found a contact form and began typing, pouring her heart onto the screen. She wrote about Sophia's terrified face, about Lucas nearly being lured away, about parents too afraid to let their children walk to school. She wrote about Walt's quiet courage, about Anthony's protective fury, about a community under siege by men who saw children as leverage in their twisted business plans. At 12:23 a.m., she hit send and whispered a prayer to whoever might be listening, 300 miles away, in a garage that doubled as the Rocky Mountain Angels' unofficial headquarters. Commander Mike "Thunder" Castellano was working on his Harley when his phone chimed with an email notification. At 54, Mike had been leading the Angels for 12 years, transforming a loose collection of motorcycle enthusiasts into something approaching a vigilant militia with a strict code of honor. Mike's background wasn't typical for a biker club leader. 20 years as an Army Ranger, including 3 deployments to Afghanistan, had taught him about leadership, strategy, and the thin line between civilization and chaos. After his discharge, he drifted for a while, struggling with purpose until he found his calling, protecting communities that law enforcement couldn't or wouldn't help. The Rocky Mountain Angels had grown from 12 founding members to over 200. Active riders across Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. They were teachers and mechanics, veterans and small business owners, grandparents and single mothers, united by chrome, leather, and an unshakable belief that evil triumphed when good people did nothing. Mike read Rebecca's email twice, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. He'd seen this pattern before. Drug dealers targeting schools because they represented the perfect combination of vulnerability and value. Children made excellent leverage, and suburban communities rarely knew how to fight back against predators who understood violence in ways they never would. He forwarded the email to his lieutenant commanders with a simple message. The emergency council meeting. Saturday morning, 0800. This one's personal. Saturday arrived grey and cold, with winter threatening in every gust of wind. The Angels gathered at Thunder's garage, 23 men and women who'd answered the call, each representing a different chapter of the organization. Jessica Phoenix Miller rode in from Fort Collins, her red hair whipping behind her as she parked next to Danny, Hammer O'Connor's massive road king. Phoenix had earned her road name by rising from an abusive marriage that nearly destroyed her, transforming her pain into purpose as she helped other victims find their strength. Hammer got his nickname from his previous career as a carpenter, but also from his approach to solving problems, direct, forceful and effective. They gathered in a circle, engines cooling in the morning air, while Mike read Rebecca's email aloud. The silence that followed was heavy with shared understanding. Every angel had a story about bullies, about feeling powerless, about the moment they decided to become the protection they'd wished for as children. How many dealers? Phoenix asked, already calculating logistics. 3 confirmed, probably more in the pipeline, Mike replied. They're testing boundaries, establishing territory. Classic expansion pattern. Hammer cracked his knuckles. So we shut it down before it spreads. Not just shut it down, said Maria Santos, a former police officer whose own department had failed to protect her daughter from gang intimidation 5 years earlier. We make an example. Show every dealer in Colorado what happens when they target schools. The conversation that followed was strategic, methodical, and decisive. This wasn't about revenge or vigilante justice. It was about demonstrating that some lines couldn't be crossed without consequences. The angels had rules, boundaries they never violated, but protecting children fell well within their moral authority. Mike pulled out his phone and began making calls. By noon, the word had gone out across 3 states. The Rocky Mountain Angels were mobilizing for their largest operation in 5 years. Not for revenge, not for territory, but for 340 children who deserved to feel safe at school. Sunday evening, Rebecca Hayes received a phone call that would change everything. The voice was deep, calm, and carried the authority of a man accustomed to command. Principal Hayes, this is Commander Castellano. We got your message. We're coming. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Monday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Dante Morales and his crew had spent the weekend planning their next phase of intimidation, confident that another week of pressure would break the school's resistance. They had no idea that 110 motorcycles were already rolling toward Millfield from every corner of Colorado. The drug dealers took their usual positions around Oakwood Elementary at 7:30 a.m., ready to continue their psychological warfare. Dante positioned himself near the main entrance. Kevin prowled the playground perimeter, and Shane watched the staff parking lot with predatory patience. Their routine had become familiar, almost comfortable in its predictability. Principal Hayes arrived earlier than usual, her stomach knotted with anticipation. Commander Castellano had called the night before with a simple message: "Keep your people inside today. We'll handle the rest." She'd spent sleepless hours wondering what that meant, praying she hadn't made a terrible mistake by reaching out to strangers. At 8:15 a.m., as children began arriving for school, parents noticed something different. The 3 dealers were still there, but they seemed agitated, constantly checking their phones and scanning the horizon with nervous energy. Something had spooked them, though no one could identify what. Mrs. Gloria Vega was walking her grandson to the entrance when Dante stepped into their path, just as he had done dozens of times before. But this time his swagger seemed forced, his smile strained. "Morning, Abuela," still feeling brave. Before Gloria could respond, a sound began building in the distance. Low at first, like distant thunder, then growing stronger, deeper, more ominous. The rumble of engines, not cars, but motorcycles. Many motorcycles. Dante's head snapped toward the sound, his confident mask slipping for the first time. Shane and Kevin converged on his position, their casual menace replaced by genuine concern. "What the hell is that?" Kevin muttered, his hand instinctively moving to the knife concealed in his jacket. The sound grew louder, closer, until it seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Then they appeared, a column of motorcycles stretching as far as the eye could see, rolling down Maple Street like an unstoppable tide of chrome and leather. Commander Mike "Thunder" Castellano led the formation on his black Harley-Davidson, his presence commanding even at a distance. Behind him rode Jessica Phoenix Miller, Danny Hammer O'Connor, Maria Santos, and 106 other angels who'd answered the call to protect children they'd never met from predators they'd sworn to stop. The procession was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. These weren't the Hollywood stereotype of wild outlaws. They were disciplined, organized, purposeful. Veterans and teachers, mechanics and small business owners, grandparents and community leaders, united by their commitment to stand between innocence and evil. Parents gathering for school drop-off stopped in their tracks, some pulling their children closer, others recognizing instinctively that these riders represented protection, not threat. The angels' patches and colors told stories of service, brotherhood, and unwavering principle. The drug dealers found themselves frozen, surrounded by a show of force they'd never imagined possible. This wasn't some local motorcycle club looking to establish territory. This was an army responding to a declaration of war against children. Mike Castellano cut his engine and dismounted with deliberate calm. At 6'3", with silver threading through his dark hair, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd faced real danger and emerged stronger. His eyes found Dante immediately, recognizing the leader through body language and positioning. The other angels formed a massive semicircle, their presence creating an invisible wall that trapped the dealers against the school fence. No one spoke, no one moved aggressively, but the message was unmistakable. Your reign of terror ends now. Dante's mouth went dry as he counted the riders surrounding him. He'd expected maybe a dozen local bikers, easily intimidated or bought off. Instead, he faced more than 100 men and women whose very presence radiated disciplined strength. These weren't street thugs or weekend warriors. They were something far more dangerous, organized, principled, and absolutely committed to their cause. Mike stepped forward, his boots clicking against the asphalt with military precision. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of command and the weight of absolute certainty. "Gentlemen, I'm Commander Castellano. I believe you've been bothering my friends." The word friends hit like a thunderclap. In that instant, Dante realized the fatal flaw in his strategy. He'd assumed the school stood alone, that suburban families had no connection to the harder world beyond their picket fences. The arrival of 110 angels shattered that assumption completely. Shane Torres, usually the coolest head in any crisis, felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning chill. His calculating mind ran through options and found none that ended well for them. They were outmanned, outgunned, and completely outclassed by opponents who clearly understood violence. Far better than they did, Kevin Blake's usual solution, intimidation through physical presence, seemed laughably inadequate when facing men and women who'd survived combat zones, street fights, and decades of standing up to bullies exactly like him. Mike continued, his voice never rising, but somehow carrying to every corner of the school grounds. "Here's how this works. You have exactly 60 seconds to explain why we shouldn't make this your worst day ever. Choose your words very carefully." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the morning birds seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see how 3 small-time dealers would respond to an ultimatum delivered by an army they'd never imagined existed. Principal Hayes watched from her office window, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope, knowing that the next 60 seconds would determine whether Oakwood Elementary remained a battleground or became a sanctuary once again. The 60 seconds stretched like hours. Dante Morales opened his mouth twice, closed it, then finally found his voice. The swagger was gone, replaced by the desperate calculation of a cornered animal. "Look, we didn't mean any real harm. Just business, you know? Nothing personal against the school." Commander Castellano's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a coldness that made even hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. "Business? You call threatening children business?" Jessica Phoenix Miller dismounted her bike and walked forward, her red hair catching the morning light. As a survivor of domestic violence who'd rebuilt her life through strength and community support, she had zero tolerance for men who preyed on the vulnerable. "I saw the security footage," she said, her voice cutting through the morning air. "You approached a 9-year-old boy. You offered him a ride. You threatened a 7-year-old girl's safety to intimidate her mother. Shane Torres tried to backpedal. We never actually hurt anyone. We were just what?" Danny Hammer O'Connor's voice boomed across the school grounds. "Just terrorizing families? Just turning a safe school into a hunting ground? Just destroying children's sense of security?" The angels had done their homework. Through connections in law enforcement, social media investigation, and community networks, they'd gathered a complete picture of the dealers' activities over the past 2 weeks. Every threat, every intimidation tactic, every moment of fear they'd caused was documented and remembered. Kevin Blake made the mistake of reaching toward his jacket, a reflexive move that immediately drew the attention of 20 angels who'd seen real combat. Maria Santos, the former police officer, stepped forward with deadly calm. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, son. These folks have been very patient so far." Kevin's hand froze, then slowly moved away from his jacket. The reality of his situation finally sank in. He was outnumbered more than 30. to one by people who weren't intimidated by street punk tactics. Commander Castellano pulled out his phone and made a call that everyone could hear. "Sheriff Martinez? This is Mike Castellano. We've got your drug problem at Oakwood Elementary contained. You might want to send a unit down here." The implications were clear. The Angels weren't vigilantes operating outside the law. They worked with law enforcement, providing the kind of immediate response that official channels couldn't deliver. Sheriff Martinez would arrive to find criminals ready for arrest, evidence documented, and witnesses prepared to testify. But the real message came next. Mike's voice carried across the school grounds with the weight of absolute authority. "Here's what's going to happen. Starting today, Oakwood Elementary School is under permanent protection of the Rocky Mountain Angels. That means 24-hour surveillance, regular patrols, and immediate response to any threat against these children or their families." He gestured to the assembled riders. "Some of these people are teachers themselves. Others are parents, grandparents, community leaders. All of them have committed to ensuring that children can learn in safety, that parents don't have to fear dropping off their kids, and that predators like you understand there are consequences for targeting the innocent." The announcement rippled through the crowd of parents and teachers who'd gathered to watch. Principal Hayes felt tears streaming down her face as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. She'd asked for help and received an army of guardian angels. Phoenix walked to her motorcycle and returned with a laminated sign that read, "This school is protected by the Rocky Mountain Angels. Any threats against students, staff, or families will be met with immediate response. Contact Commander Castellano, 555, Angel 1. She zip-tied the sign to the school fence where everyone could see it, then turned back to the dealers. "This is your only warning. Find a new line of work in a different town far away from children, because if we see you within 5 miles of any school, playground, or family neighborhood, the conversation won't be this friendly." Danny Hammer pulled out a tablet and showed the dealers something that made their faces go pale. It was a network map showing Angel chapters across Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. Hundreds of riders connected by communication systems, shared databases, and mutual support agreements. "We know who you are now," he said simply. "Dante Morales, Kevin Blake, Shane Torres. Your faces, your vehicles, your known associates. This information has been shared with every chapter in our network. You can't hide, you can't intimidate us, and you can't win." The psychological warfare was complete. The dealers had gone from feeling powerful and protected to being exposed, outnumbered, and facing an organized opposition they couldn't fight, bribe, or intimidate. Sheriff Martinez arrived with 2 patrol cars, his deputies professionally documenting the scene, while Martinez spoke quietly with Commander Castellano. The sheriff was a practical man who understood that sometimes unofficial protection filled gaps that official channels couldn't address quickly enough. "Any weapons or drugs we should know about?" Martinez asked the dealers. Under the watchful eyes of 110 angels, all 3 men submitted to searches that revealed knives, drug paraphernalia, and small quantities of methamphetamine and fentanyl. Enough for arrests, enough to remove them from the community, enough to send a message that Millfield was no longer open for their kind of business. As the dealers were led away in handcuffs, Commander Castellano addressed the gathered parents and teachers. "The immediate threat is over, but protection is just beginning. We'll maintain a visible presence here until everyone feels safe again. Our children deserve to learn without fear." The transformation was immediate and profound. Parents who'd been dropping off children with nervous glances and hurried goodbyes were now lingering, talking, smiling. Children who'd sensed adult anxiety without understanding its source began playing freely again. Walt Briggs walked over to Mike Castellano, his weathered hand extended. "Thank you," was all he said, but the handshake conveyed decades of gratitude. Principal Hayes stepped outside for the first time in weeks without looking over her shoulder, knowing that 110 guardian angels had just turned her school from a target into a fortress of safety. 6 months later, Oakwood Elementary School had become something extraordinary, not just a place of learning, but a symbol of what communities could achieve when ordinary people refused to accept that evil was inevitable. The changes were visible from the moment visitors approached the school. The Rocky Mountain Angels protection sign remained prominently displayed, but it had been joined by others. Community watch area, volunteer tutors, welcome, and safe haven certified. What had begun as an emergency response had evolved into something far more profound, a partnership between traditional education and community protection that other schools across Colorado were now trying to replicate. Principal Rebecca Hayes walked through hallways that hummed with renewed energy. Student attendance had reached an all-time high, as parents who'd once considered transferring their children now saw Oakwood as the safest school in the district. Test scores were up, behavioral problems were down, and teachers reported a level of job satisfaction they'd never experienced before. The Angels had kept their promise of permanent protection, but their presence had evolved beyond simple security. Commander Mike Thunder Castellano visited the school twice weekly, not as an intimidating biker, but as a guest speaker who talked to older students about leadership, service, and standing up for others. His military background and life experiences provided lessons that textbooks couldn't teach. Jessica Phoenix Miller had become the unofficial coordinator of the school's anti-bullying program. Her own journey from victim to protector resonated with students who faced their own challenges with intimidation and fear. She taught them that strength wasn't about size or aggression. It was about refusing to let others suffer alone. Danny Hammer O'Connor used his carpentry skills to lead a volunteer program that had rebuilt the school's playground, painted murals in the hallways, and created an outdoor classroom where students could learn surrounded by beauty instead of concrete. His gentle demeanor with children contrasted sharply with his imposing presence, teaching everyone that appearances could be deceiving. The transformation extended far beyond the school grounds. The drug dealer's arrest had triggered a broader investigation that uncovered a distribution network spanning 3 counties. Dante Morales, Kevin Blake, and Shane Torres were serving sentences ranging from 5 to 8 years. Their criminal enterprise dismantled by the combined efforts of local law enforcement and Angel intelligence gathering. More importantly, their defeat had sent ripples throughout the criminal community. Word spread quickly through drug networks. Schools under Angel protection were off limits. The cost of challenging that protection far outweighed any potential profit from targeting suburban families. Other communities began reaching out to the Rocky Mountain Angels, seeking similar protection for their schools and neighborhoods. The organization expanded to meet the demand, draining new chapters and developing protocols that balanced vigilance with respect for law enforcement authority. Patricia Daniels, whose daughter Sophia had been among the first children threatened by the dealers, now served as president of the school's Parent-Teacher Association. The fear that had once paralyzed her had transformed into fierce advocacy for child safety and community involvement. She used to drop Sophia off and drive away as quickly as possible, she reflected during a school board meeting. Now I volunteer in the classroom, help with fundraisers, and know the names of all her friends' parents. Fear isolated us from each other, but fighting back brought us together. Walt Briggs had become something of a local celebrity, his quiet courage during the crisis inspiring a documentary that aired on regional television. But he remained the same gentle giant who tied children's shoelaces and retrieved lost balls from the roof. Except now he did so with the knowledge that his community valued his protection as much as his service. Mr. Anthony Reeves had used the experience to develop a curriculum about community heroism that was now being adopted by schools throughout the state. His students learned about ordinary people who'd made extraordinary differences: firefighters, teachers, veterans, and yes, motorcycle clubs that protected children. The academic results spoke for themselves. Oakwood Elementary's reading scores had improved by 23% over the previous year, math scores by 19%. When children felt safe, they learned better. When teachers didn't have to worry about external threats, they could focus entirely on education. But perhaps the most profound change was cultural. Millfield had discovered that safety wasn't something that happened to them. It was something they created together. Neighborhood watch programs expanded, community events flourished, and residents took active roles in maintaining the environment that protected their children. The Rocky Mountain Angels maintained their visible presence, but their role had evolved from emergency responders to community partners. They participated in school fundraisers, supported local businesses, and demonstrated that strength and service were two sides of the same coin. Commander Castellano often reflected on how the Oakwood mission had changed his organization. "We came to protect children from drug dealers," he told a gathering of Angel chapters. "We ended up protecting an entire community's faith in itself." On the first anniversary of the confrontation, Oakwood Elementary held a celebration that drew visitors from across the region. Children performed songs they'd written about courage and community. Parents shared stories about how their lives had changed. Teachers talked about rediscovering their passion for education in an environment of true safety. The Rocky Mountain Angels were honored guests, but they insisted the real heroes were the ordinary people who'd refused to accept that bullies should rule their world. Principal Hayes, Walt Briggs, Anthony Reeves, and countless parents had shown that communities didn't need to wait for someone else to save them. They could save themselves. As children played on the playground that angels had helped rebuild, their laughter carrying on the Colorado wind, it was clear that some victories echoed far beyond their original battlegrounds. Oakwood Elementary had become proof that when good people organized, trained and committed to protecting innocence, evil had no choice but to retreat. The lesson was simple but profound. Communities that refused to be victims rarely remained victims for long. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.